Let me ask you something straight up. If Deebo Samuel walked back into that for Niners locker room tomorrow, would you be excited? Or would you be thinking this team is living in the past? Because this whole thing started with a comment that didn't feel accidental. George Kittle is on Radio Row during Super Bowl week, talking about how a so-called rebuild year still turned into 13 wins and a wild card victory. He's smiling, he's confident, he's saying all the boys are coming back, and then he drops it. Maybe we add some past friends. And then, almost casually, he admits he hung out with Deebo the night before. That's not random. That's not a throwaway line. And when Kittle says, "I love Deebo," and leaves it hanging there, you know exactly what he's doing. He's not negotiating contracts. He's not in the front office. But he is one of the emotional leaders of this team. And when leaders start publicly welcoming someone back with open arms, that means something. Then, Christian McCaffrey goes on and takes it a step further. He doesn't hesitate, says Deebo would be welcomed back with open arms. Talks about his energy, talks about the fear he puts into defenses when the ball is in his hands. Talks about the consequences defenders pay when they try to tackle him. That's not nostalgia, that's respect from inside the building. So now the question becomes real. Is this just players missing their guy? Or is there actually a path for this to happen? Because here's what makes this interesting. Kittle didn't say this in a vacuum. He had just spent time with Deebo. That tells you something. If there was even a hint from Deebo that he'd be open to coming back, that message probably came directly from him. And if that message exists, you better believe the front office hears about it one way or another. Now, I've seen the reaction online. Some fans are completely against it. They're saying the 49ers need to get younger, faster, lighter. They don't want to go backward, and I understand that. Nobody wants to relive 2024 when the offense struggled to separate and things felt forced at times. But here's where we need to slow down. This isn't about bringing back 2021 Deebo as the centerpiece of the offense. This isn't about rewinding the clock and pretending he's still in his absolute prime. This is about asking a smarter question. At the right price, in the right role, could Deebo Samuel still help this football team? That's the real debate. And before we even touch the money, before we break down the numbers, before we talk about market value and cap flexibility, I want your honest take right now. If the 49ers brought Deebo back at the right price, not star money, not WR1 money, would you be in? Yes or no? Drop that in the comments. I want to see where you stand before we even get into the financials and the role discussion, because once we start breaking that down, this conversation changes. And if you've been riding with this channel through every rumor, every contract situation, every offseason chess move, make sure you're subscribed and turn those notifications on. We're building toward 2,000 subscribers, and this offseason is going to be loaded with real decisions that actually shape this Super Bowl window. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because once you take the emotion out of it, once you stop viewing this in black and white, and you really look at what Deebo is in 2026 versus what he was in 2021, the conversation becomes a lot more nuanced. And the fit, it might not be what you think. Let's talk about what Deebo actually is right now. Alright, so let's strip the emotion out of this and talk about who Deebo Samuel actually is right now. He just turned 30, that matters. He's not 25. He's not the explosive, do-everything centerpiece from 2021 who was lining up at wide receiver, running back, motioning across the formation, and breaking the league. That version of Deebo earned a massive contract because he was operating in the 80th and 90th percentile of efficiency metrics. That was peak production, but here's the part people gloss over. He was still productive last season. In Washington, the role changed, the average depth of target dropped. The Commanders used him more in screens and underneath concepts. They had Terry McLaurin stretching the field. They had other players taking pressure off. And what happened? The yardage climbed back up. The yards after catch were strong, the touchdowns ticked up, his expected points added per target rose to around the 60th percentile. That's not elite, but it's not washed either. It's above average, and that's where this conversation gets real. The problem in 2020 wasn't that Deebo forgot how to play football. The problem was role inflation. Once Brandon Ayuk went down, Deebo had to shift into a featured wide receiver role. He was asked to be the primary separator in a offense that already ranked near the bottom of the league in average separation. That's not his game. He's not a downfield burner who consistently wins on deep breaking routes. He's a bulldozer. He's a tone setter. He's the guy you get the ball to in space and dare defenses to bring him down. When he's your WR1, the flaws show. When he's your weapon, the strengths show. That distinction is everything. The 49ers ranked 24th in average separation last season. That's a real problem. And no, signing Deebo alone has not magically fixed that. But if you're viewing him as a third option, a motion piece, a manufactured touch weapon who punishes defenses after the catch, now you're talking about something different. Think about it like this. If Deebo is your WR1 at $15 million a year, that's a risk. If Deebo is your WR3 weapon at $7 to $8 million with incentives, paired with a drafted separator and Ricky Pearsall stepping forward, that's a completely different equation. So let me ask you this, if he's not your featured guy, if he's not the centerpiece, but he's your rotational enforcer who gives Brock Purdy another yards after catch option and adds physicality back into the offense, does that change your opinion? Because I think for a lot of fans, the answer depends entirely on that role. And let's not ignore something important. When Deebo had defined structure around him, when Ayuk was playing the X and stretching coverage, Deebo thrived. In 2021 and 2023, when everyone had clear assignments, his efficiency spiked. When he had to be the guy who carried the separation burden, that's when things dipped. That's not an indictment, that's roster construction. So the key question isn't, is Deebo still 2021 Deebo? The key question is, can he still be effective in a layered offense where he's not asked to do everything? Statistically, the answer looks like yes. Financially, that's where this becomes complicated. Because the market for veteran receivers right now is overheated. Absolutely overheated. And if Deebo believes he's a $13 to $15 million player, and the 49ers believe he's a $5 to $10 million player, the gap could kill this entire idea before it even begins. But if there's interest in coming back, if the familiarity matters, if chasing another ring matters more than squeezing out every last dollar, then suddenly this becomes viable. So here's another quick one for you. At $8 million with incentives, are you in? Or are you still out no matter what? Drop that in the comments. And if this breakdown is helping you see the layers of this situation a little more clearly, hit the like button. It helps push this conversation out to more 49ers fans who are trying to figure out what direction this team should take. Because now we have to talk about the part that really decides everything, the money, the receiver market, and why the draft might actually be the biggest piece of this entire puzzle. Now we get to the part that actually decides whether this is realistic or just good off-season conversation, the money. Because emotion is one thing, locker room love is one thing. But cap space and market value, that's what makes or breaks reunions in this league. Right now, projected market value has Deebo around $13 million per year. And if we're being honest, that number is too high for the rule we just outlined. At $13 million, you're paying him like a top-tier contributor. That's not what this version of Deebo is supposed to be in San Francisco. And here's the bigger issue, the entire veteran receiver market is inflated. You've got guys like Jauan Jennings projected north of $20 million. Think about that. A player who has thrived as a WR2 or WR3 is being valued at $22 million per year in projections. That tells you everything about how overheated this market is. Even Tier 2 receivers are commanding $10 to $15 million annually. That's dangerous territory. If the 49ers try to fix their separation problem purely through free agency, they're going to overspend, and overspending at wide receiver is exactly how you end up in cap trouble 2 years from now. That's why this can't be a one-move solution. If Deebo comes back, it has to be part of a layered plan. Let's build the realistic version. You draft an explosive separator early. Someone who can play the X or Z and immediately stress defenses vertically. You add that cheap rookie contract to the room. Then, if Deebo signs in the $5 to $10 million range with incentives, he becomes the physical complement. Then maybe you add one more cost-efficient veteran. Now suddenly your receiver room looks completely different. Ricky Pearsall as your primary separator. A rookie with speed and upside. Deebo as your YAC enforcer. Jordan Watkins and Jacob Cowing competing for depth roles. That's not nostalgia, that's roster layering. And don't forget something important. The 49ers are potentially recouping money from the Ayuk situation. That's significant if they recover part of that signing bonus and regain cap flexibility. That gives them room to operate, not room to splurge recklessly, but room to be strategic. This is why I caution against putting all your eggs in the trade for Justin Jefferson basket. Yes, that's the massive swing. Yes, it would move the needle in a huge way. But it would cost major draft capital and require Minnesota's cooperation. That's not something you can bank on. The smarter play, draft and supplement. And here's where I want your take again. Would you rather spend big on one-star receiver and sacrifice draft capital? Or be draft an explosive rookie and sign Deebo at a team-friendly number to balance the room? Drop a or B in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where you land, because this is the philosophical crossroads of the off-season. And if you're enjoying this kind of deeper roster-building conversation, not just hot takes, but actual construction talk, help us keep growing. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and every single subscription gets us closer. Hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you don't miss the next breakdown, because free agency and the draft are about to reshape this team. Now here's where it all ties together. This isn't just about Deebo. This is about Brock Purdy's window. This is about whether this offense can jump from middle-of-the-pack separation back into the top tier. And that hinge point might not even be Deebo at all, it might be Ricky Pearsall.